A lot of the surgeons that I worked with came to the same conclusion that we were actually tools in an enterprise meant to financially devastate patients that came through the doors.
You became an anesthesiologist in the early 1990s, but you didn't like what you were seeing. And so tell us, the journey to the opening of the surgery center was sort of incubating with you for several years. What did you see that really turned you off, especially about allegedly nonprofit hospitals?
Yeah, I think as an outgrowth of my philosophical journey, I realized the golden rule was the way that people should and naturally did interact with each other. And I wanted to be a physician partly because of the whole concept of mutually beneficial exchange. And so I assumed very naively when I entered this profession that everyone in this profession, including people that ran hospitals and insurance companies, had the same ideas. So I started my practice and began to find very quickly that the hospital administrators were not my friend. They were actually my enemy, and even worse, they were the financial adversary of many of the patients that entered their doors. I found myself having to acknowledge that I was truly an accomplice, an accessory to a financial crime in many cases where I was treating a patient, giving them anesthetic care, and a lot of the surgeons that I worked with came to the same conclusion that we were actually tools in an enterprise meant to financially devastate patients that came through the door. So I didn't sign up for that. That was not philosophically what I wanted to do, and the only way to escape becoming really a financial adversary of patients was to gain control over the institution. Most physicians, I think, embrace the concept of mutually beneficial exchange. I think this hit and run mentality is the predominant one at most hospitals in the United States, particularly those who claim to not make a profit. So walking away and establishing our own facility where we had control over what patients were charged, including not charging them at all, was the only way for us to escape a situation where we felt horrible for being actually even involved in patient care.
When you decided to start, how did you go out and determine what should a price be? You knew what the hospitals charged, sort of, but how did you come up with your own numbers?
Steve Lantier and I walked out of our anesthesia practices with 10 surgeons with us. And 30 days after we purchased the Surgery Center of Oklahoma, we actually did our first case. We wanted to charge patients a fair price, and our mission was to never take a dime of money from the government, because that really does contaminate any business operation as far as I'm concerned. And we also wanted patients to know upfront how much they were going to pay. The first week, we had a patient call, a young lady with a breast mass. And I think going through her example will give people an idea of how we come up with our pricing even to this day. And she wanted to know how much it was going to cost to have that removed. And she had no insurance. And I didn't know the answer to her question. This was why we opened, and I was so excited. But she asked this question, and I didn't realize I didn't know. So I called the surgeon who would perform the procedure, and I asked him how much he wanted for his fee. And of course, he didn't know. So I said, well, give me a fee or I'll give her one for you. And so he said $500. And I thought that was very reasonable. So I hung up on him actually before he changed his mind. As an anesthesiologist, I basically bill for my time. And I had a good idea of what my time was worth, and I knew this procedure was going to take 20 or 30 minutes. From the facility side, I knew the supplies required would be minimal. I'd been in the operating room long enough to know, that some supplies cost more than others, and there were not going to be any expensive supplies to perform this case. So I was about to take her off hold when I realized she wanted to know at the end of this procedure, I was sure whether she had cancer or not. So I called a pathologist friend and I asked him how much he wanted. And of course, he had no idea. So we went back and forth. And I said, this lady's been on hold for 5 minutes. I need an answer. She's going to hang up. And so he said $28. So I took her off hold, and I've told this story many, many times, but I said, it's $1,900. And she said, for what? And I said, for everything. And she said, the hospital down the street from you, you should know, wanted 19,000 just for the facility. And after we performed her surgery and kind of sharpened our pencils, I realized we'd made a profit. And the pathology charges now have gone up significantly, because the pathology part of diagnosing these cancers is much more sophisticated. But had the pathology prices not gone up, our price is the same. So that $1,900 breast biopsy is now $2,365 on our website. The entire increase of which is a manifestation of the increase in pathology charges, over which I have no control. So that ultimately is how we create our prices. And we had a patient call, how much for a hernia surgery, and I went through the same motions. And how much for a tonsillectomy, and I went through the same phone call and motions. And then one day, someone from our front office called me and said, someone's calling in for a tonsillectomy. How much should I quote them? And I said, aren't you writing these down? And so there was this list that was populated of prices that we could quote over the phone. And that's what we did until we launched the website with all of the prices in 2009.